That night, when silence split apart over the skies of Doha, the Qatari capital looked like a painting of light suspended above the sands. Towers gleamed, roads throbbed with life, and inside political chambers the air boiled over with heavy files waiting for signatures. In the middle of this charged atmosphere stood a modest building, guarded in a way that raised no suspicion. Yet in that very moment, its walls enclosed enough to shift the course of an entire war. Inside, Hamas leaders sat in a secret meeting with a single item on the agenda, amending the terms of the US proposed ceasefire from previous weeks. These men knew that a word added or erased from paper could mean life or death for hundreds, perhaps thousands. Leading them was Khalil al-Hayya, renowned for his steel resolve and quiet calm. Beside him sat Zahir Jabarin, head of the movement's financial arm and guardian of its overseas investments. Close by was Mohammed Ismail Darwish, head of Hamas's Shura Council, a man known never to smile except when standing at the heart of a storm, and whispers swirled about whether Khalid Mashal, the former political bureau chief, might attend, though his presence was contested in the accounts. Before climbing to the second floor where the meeting hall awaited, everyone placed their phones on the ground level with their aides. It was a routine security measure they always followed. Yet this time, that small act would turn into a fateful crossroad. Among the aides stood Hammam al-Hayya, Khalil's son, a young man who carried his father's features, not merely an assistant but a piece of his heart and blood. Beside him were Jihad Laban, Khalil's office director, along with Abdullah Abdul Wahid, Momin Hasuna, and Ahmad al-Mamluk. Upstairs, leaders spoke in slow, careful tones. Downstairs, sons and companions held guard over their trust. The minutes pass as usual, the papers are turned, the conversations branch out, and the atmosphere is charged with seriousness. But the sky outside the building was carrying something else. In an unexpected moment, the roar of airplanes begins to draw near. Doha was used to the hum of civilian planes from Hamad International Airport, but not this. The sound was deeper, heavier, filled with dark promises. Before anyone could comprehend, Israeli jets fired their missiles. The shocking detail, the strike wasn't aimed at the entire building, but at the first floor specifically, the place where the phones and aides had been left. In a flash, the first floor became a mass of fire and smoke. The 5 aides were martyred, among them Hammam al-Hayya, who died in his father's place. The walls shuddered, windows shattered, and the air filled with screams and ash. On the second floor, the leaders sustained injuries of varying severity, but according to the movement, they survived. News of their survival spread like wildfire, yet doubts lingered. Were they truly safe? Why had they not appeared publicly? How could they escape without serious wounds when the blast had reached their floor? Questions piled up, answers postponed. And with them came the most troubling question of all: how could this happen in Qatar? Qatar is not merely a small state. It is Washington's most vital ally in the Middle East. It holds the rare title of major non-NATO ally. Most importantly, it hosts Al-Udeid Air Base, the largest American base outside US soil, supposedly guaranteeing 100% protection of Qatar's skies. That same base had recently proven its strength, intercepting the bulk of Iranian missiles fired toward Qatar. Back then, Washington had proudly declared, "Qatar's skies are secure." So how could Israeli jets fly 1,800 kilometers, cross into Qatari airspace, strike their target with precision, and Al-Udeid not stir? The official US explanation: we weren't informed of the attack. But that version quickly unraveled under reporters' questions, reminding officials of an earlier admission. The American president himself had said he asked his advisor to warn Qatar of the strike. So how could they claim ignorance? Reports indicated US radars at Al-Udeid had tracked the jets the moment they entered Qatar's skies. The question wasn't whether they knew, but why they didn't act. Washington insisted. It all happened within minutes. There was no time. Yet that excuse collapsed under the sheer distance covered. 1,800 kilometers is no quick dash. The jets required mid-air refueling. That meant large, slow-moving tanker planes, easy targets for any average radar, vulnerable to ground-to-air missiles. How could no one see them? Or rather, how could no one choose to act? Another question arose: through whose skies did those jets pass? They could not have reached Qatar without crossing Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, or Kuwait. Which country opened the skies? Which one deliberately closed its eyes? What made it worse was that Israel could have avoided all this with long-range ballistic missiles. That option was simpler, faster, and spared Arab governments the embarrassment of opening their skies. Yet Israel chose fighter jets. Why? The answer lay in the political message. We reach wherever we want, whenever we want, in whatever way we want. The aim was not merely to kill leaders, it was to send a message of deterrence to the entire region. The first message, to Hamas, that rejecting the ceasefire would cost them their lives. The second message was for the neighboring states. What happened in Qatar could happen to you if you try to stand in the way. To grasp the depth of this message, we have to go back to two earlier stories. The first story from Turkey. At the start of the Gaza war, Netanyahu announced that Israel would eliminate Hamas leaders wherever they were. Weeks later, Ankara announced the arrest of 33 Mossad agents, and it is pursuing 13 others. Israel failed to operate freely inside Turkish territory. But politics accomplished what force could not. After US and Israeli pressure, Turkey lifted its protection over Saleh al-Aruri, prompting him to leave its territory and become an easy target, later killed in Lebanon. Turkey's message was clear: the land is ours and the decision is ours. The second story is from Egypt. After the January 2011 revolution, in a moment of political collapse, Israel tested the Egyptian army's response. It sent 2 transport planes under the pretext of evacuating the embassy's furniture. It didn't ask for political permission, but faced a blunt threat from air defenses: come closer and you'll be struck. The planes turned back immediately. Field Marshal Tantawi stated it plainly: the situation is 100% not a political reassurance, but a military certainty that the army was the last line of defense. Israel didn't dare test Egypt's airspace with fighter jets, even at a moment of regime weakness. But Qatar is neither Turkey nor Egypt. This wasn't a trial balloon, it was a direct strike. And here the bitter truth emerges: the American presence in Qatar wasn't to protect Qatar, but to protect Israel's interests, even at Qatar's expense. Some accounts tried to justify the strike by saying, "We detected the leader's phone signals," but that's a naive explanation. Operations of this scale aren't built in hours. They require weeks of intelligence gathering, planning, training, and securing political approvals. And the more dangerous question: how did Israel know the meeting time so precisely? Knowing the location could be explained by tracking phones, but knowing the minute of the meeting points to a human source or a deep intelligence breach. The scene recalls the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Iran: precise knowledge of where he slept, the moment he entered the room, and a tightly planned getaway after execution. The same scenario repeats: place, time, target, and jets at the ready. One might think Qatar itself was complicit, but that seems far-fetched, for obvious reasons. One, the sovereign insult. Within less than 2 months, Qatari territory was struck twice, once by Iranian missiles and once by Israeli fighters. Qatar wouldn't choose such humiliation for itself. 2. Investments and ties with Washington. Qatar has spent hundreds of billions on US partnerships. It's illogical to expose itself to such losses. 3. National security. If America didn't protect Qatar, then who would? Any Qatari collusion would leave the state exposed before its own people. 4. Internal blowback. A Qatari citizen watching the country repeatedly struck from the sky could lose trust in its leadership, a domestic political risk the leadership cannot bear. Indeed, Doha stated it was not informed in advance, but only while the attack was underway. A phone rings from Washington as explosions shake the ground. The American president apologizes and promises it won't happen again. But promises don't bring the dead back. What can Qatar do? The military option is off the table. Qatar's air force can't face Israel. Expelling US forces would create a deadly security vacuum. Cutting ties with Washington would be political suicide. Only the diplomatic path remains: complaints at the Security Council, statements of condemnation, and the oft-repeated phrase, "We reserve the right to respond." Israel, for its part, offered its narrative. The attack came in response to the Jerusalem operation, in which 4 Israelis were killed. But did that strike change the war's equation? Of course not. It was a ready-made pretext. Israel had been waiting for any excuse to execute its plan. The scene resembles what happens with Houthi rockets or drones. They don't change anything fundamental on the battlefield, but they serve as a pretext for broader strikes. The more important result, Hamas today is alone. After the axis of resistance abandoned it, it moved from acting to merely reacting. On October 7th, it was the initiator. Now, it is the side absorbing the blows. And while Qatar finds itself under fire twice in 2 months, it realizes its alliances need urgent review. But reviewing alliances is one thing, taking practical steps is another. Most likely, things will remain as they are, relations with Washington as strong as ever, ties with Israel continuing in secrecy as before, and relations with Iran persisting despite the strikes. In the end, some facts are plain. Hamas leaders were on Qatari soil under state protection. Israel breached the airspace and struck a building in the heart of the capital. America knew but did not act. Qatar was left powerless, issuing a tepid diplomatic statement. The building that shook that night was not merely walls and concrete, but a symbol of a larger political and security exposure. The leaders who were evacuated alive will remain surrounded by questions. Did they truly survive? Will it happen again? Will they accept a ceasefire under threat, or will they leave Qatar for somewhere else, seeking a new refuge? As for Qatar, it now faces its hardest question. If the world's greatest ally doesn't defend you but allows you to be struck, what is that ally worth? And in the final moment, the question hangs. If you were the decision-maker in Qatar, what would you do? Stay silent as others did, or open a new page of confrontation, change your equations, or surrender to a pre-written fate? The sky that opened over Doha that night has not closed. What happened isn't the end of a story, but the beginning of a new chapter.